Well, good day, everybody. I think it's probably the best thing to say because I'm delighted that we've got Kathy Godfrey with us from Canada, from Montana. Is that right? Is it Montana, Kathy?
No, Montana is in the US.
Oh,
I'm from Alberta, which
Alberta.
is
That's
north of Montana.
north of Montana. I knew it's in the sort of the mountain area somewhere. And forgive my poor geography. Forgive my poor geography. And welcome for everybody else who's around the world. If you want to put in the chat where you're from, that would be great, because it's always nice to know that we are multinational, and it always seems to be that we have similar problems wherever we are. We probably have similar solutions as well, but that's one of those things. Communication is a huge topic, and of course those of you who are coaches, as us who are coaches, should be all about communication. But are we really good communicators? And so I'm not going to lecture anybody today. This is an open meeting. I just wanted to rather sort of set the scene, and hopefully we will all go away, including me. Hopefully we will all go away the better prepared to communicate with others, whether it's in our work, whether it's in our families, whether it's over a cup of coffee, whatever. Because communication is hugely important, and I think it is really what makes the world go round. So, how do we communicate? Let's give some thought to the number of ways we can communicate with each other. Okay, you've had enough time to think. Right. Somebody give me some ways that we communicate.
Through BSL.
Sorry, Sarah, explain.
British Sign Language. Language.
Okay, sign language. Okay, sign language. So that is really a sort of a visual way of communicating, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. What other ways are there?
By how our energy is, what we give off energy wise.
Our energy. Wow, we're getting really deep really quickly. Thank you, Sonia. I've got that similarly down the bottom of my list, and I was expecting that to I was trying to eke that out. Kathy, what about you?
We talk to each other.
We talk to each other. We do indeed. It's a sort of an audio process, isn't it? Where we talk to each other because we understand each other's language. What other ways are there of communicating?
Body language.
Body language.
There we go, snap.
Yeah.
There's also voice tonality.
Voice tonality. Indeed there is. Yeah.
Microphone.
Say again?
Microphone.
Okay.
My daughter, so she's pre-verbal and non-verbal, and she uses Makaton sign language.
Yeah.
Well, we are encouraging her to use Makaton.
Excellent.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. And there's the written word as well, is there not?
Yeah.
And sentence.
But
yes. That's the best one.
It's one of the ones. It was so obvious it was out there, wasn't it? What about music?
Yeah.
What about art?
Yeah. Telephone.
Telephone. Okay. Drawing pictures, doodling.
Facial expressions.
Face-like expressions. I talk with my hands. There are so many ways of communicating, and I'm sure that if we give it some thought, we can come up with some really good ones, which we probably didn't think about before. Anyway, but it is important that we transmit our communication, and hopefully by using that word, I've given you a clue as to what next we're going to move on to. So if we're transmitting communication, what is the other part of the communication?
Receiving.
Receiving. How good are we at receiving communication? What do we need to receive communication?
A
A
listening
good
ear.
brain.
Say again, Sonia, sorry.
A listening ear.
A listening ear. 2 of them.
Yeah.
Okay. What
A
else?
good brain.
A good brain. A good brain.
To
Okay.
interpret.
An
to interpret.
interpreter. Yep. Okay.
I believe the environment is conducive to the way that we receive the information as well.
The environment. Wow. Yes, absolutely.
Intuition.
Intuition.
Time, Ian.
Sorry, John.
Time.
Time. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Focus.
I was going to say focus because
Okay.
most of us listen to answer, not to truly listen.
I think a lot
So-
of us hear. I think a lot of us hear answers, but perhaps we don't listen to them. Yes. It is. It's all of these things, isn't it? But I think one of the major aspects of it is, are we actually transmitting our message in the way that the recipient is going to understand it? Whose responsibility is it to make sure that message is received properly? Is it the recipient or is it the transmitter?
Transmitter.
Transmitter.
Yeah.
You know what you want to say in the message. So you've got to get the recipient to understand that. So how can we get the recipient to understand our message, perhaps as quickly as possible?
Remove
By using-
distractions.
Sorry.
Steve,
Remove distractions.
remove distractions. Good plan. Sarah,
By using as many forms of communication at one time that we can.
wow.
So
Okay,
sign language,
yes.
body language, communication, listening,
Okay, so
and
it's
sign.
transmitting it in different ways simultaneously,
Yeah.
or even one after another. To me, a really good maths teacher, who I was fortunate to have, explained everything in 3 different ways. Sure, he only used voice and expression, but he used 3 different modalities in order to get the message across, and that way he got the message across to a larger audience. How does a comedian communicate?
Tells a joke.
Tells a joke. If I wrote the joke down, would it mean as much?
Visually,
Visually, yep.
timing,
Timing,
imagination of the person
okay.
receiving,
Animated.
Animated,
Voice tone.
okay.
Context.
Context. Okay, so he's playing to a huge audience. How is he going to get that message across, the joke across to everybody?
They don't always.
They don't always. Absolutely. That's exactly the answer I was looking for. They don't always, but they aim to get it across to as many people as possible. Now, if a comedian at the start of the show walked on stage and immediately started telling jokes, what do you think would happen?
you get lost in translation.
You get lost in translation. Are the audience ready to receive?
No, because they haven't connected with the audience yet.
Haven't connected with the audience yet. So lots of acts. They have a warm-up act, don't they? They get people in the mood. So they're already ready to say, okay, the next guy is going to come on, I'm going to laugh. Perhaps. And unfortunately, I don't have a warm-up act. But it is one of those things. And what is that warm-up act doing?
Engaging the audience.
Engaging the audience. Developing the rapport. Which is hugely important, isn't it? I mean, those of us who are coaches, developing rapport is hugely important. And this is where I'm getting on to not just talking with adults, but talking with children, talking with adolescents, talking with anybody. Who is it easier to gain rapport with? A child, a teenager, or an adult?
The child.
Okay.
I don't think you can necessarily determine that. It depends on the person, the individual.
Good answer, Jackie. Thank you. It does depend.
I was going to say all of them.
The thing is, as adults, we probably work much more closely with adults because we have got that world experience and we expect them to have that world experience too. We may be wrong, but it's a good starting point. When it comes to working with teenagers, are we speaking the same language? Should we be speaking the same language?
It's not possible to speak the same language.
No, we adapt. No, teenagers are very angry.
Some teenagers are very angry.
Well, a lot of them, well, in the
Whatever-
media at the moment.
Whatever language you speak, they create a new one. So you're never on the same page.
They keep on changing the name and the meaning of words as well, don't they?
Well, they have a different language from our era when we were growing up. It's all different now.
Yeah.
So I feel it's a case of learning or talking on their level.
Okay. And what benefit does that bring?
It creates the rapport, and then you're able to communicate together.
Okay. How is your understanding if you are speaking their language? How is your understanding of what they're saying?
I don't know. I feel that it's easier to listen to them in order to create the rapport than to try to speak their language. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. It makes great sense. Well, it does to me. Does it make sense to everybody else? John's nodding sagely.
Yeah, I think you have to be cautious, I think, about trying to jump into using young people's language. I think sometimes it's a tricky path to navigate, that one, I would say.
And the reason for your comment there, John?
So it can, I think sometimes it can demonstrate a superficiality if you're starting to use the words that the young people use that aren't necessarily the words that you would use. So I agree with the speakers that said about how young people adapt language and different words mean different things. Sick used to mean unwell when I was young, for example. But yeah, I think it can sound patronizing as well if you start trying to talk in the way that they talk.
Can I give you an example?
Okay. Jackie?
Something that happened recently. So one of my peers said to me that I was very formal and my WhatsApps were all very formal, and she suggested that I try to use emojis. And then the next time I posted in the family group, I used emojis with the help of AI, I have to say, because I never understand the emojis. And my children were like, "Mom, are you okay? No, this is not you. Please don't do this again." So I agree with John. It can be very superficial, and the young people don't like that.
So I'll tell you why I said what I said, because it's
Yes.
interesting hearing the different perspectives. I did some podcast training, and it came up that you do adapt to the audience that you're talking to, so your language does change depending. So if I was trying to reach a younger audience, I'd have to make sure I'm talking to a younger audience.
Yeah.
So that's why I feel the way I do on it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I mean, I'm 21 today. This is what I ask when I'm teaching people. How old are you today? I think it just differs.
Yeah.
I think you're right. The difficulty here is you're going into a new audience is
Yeah.
how, whether you jump in with both feet, whether you take it gently, whether you have a plan to develop into their language, perhaps. And I'm always mindful of a time when I used to work in a behind a bar in Cornwall. And the Cornish language, it wasn't so much the Cornish language, but the Cornish dialect made it sometimes difficult to understand what was being ordered and things like that. And while I was brought up in Cornwall, I schooled elsewhere. And so therefore my natural dialect is not Cornish. However, if I dropped into the Cornish dialect, which was actually relatively quite straightforward, I found I could understand far better what others were saying. The difficulty I had was, do they think I'm taking the mickey? Do they think I'm just impersonating them for the sake of it? And it took me a long time to get over that, because actually I found that they didn't. Or at least if they did, they didn't say anything. So perhaps they were being kind to me. But it is one of those difficult situations, isn't it? Of how aloof do you stand from the person with whom you are communicating? How close can you get to the person you are communicating in order to get your message across? And
It's quite funny because I work with teenagers every single day, and even though they've got a disability, they've still got their quirkiness, and they see my grey hair, and I'm seen as a grandma, so they relate to me like as a grandma. But then I'll come back with the cheekiness that I've learnt from them, and I'll say, "Hi, I know what you're doing. I know what you're saying," and they don't have to say anything, and I can just see it, and they laugh because they know I'm right.
okay. And
Sorry.
and that's fine, Sarah. How does that affect your relationship with them?
Well, they actually, I find that they'll seek me out and come and sit with me and come and talk to me if they feel like they want to, or if they need a hug, they'll come over and get my hand and put it over their shoulder for a hug. We do fist bumps, and they show their respect to me by giving me a fist bump. And I find that as you get to know them and you do these little gestures of like fist bumps and saying, "Oh, you're okay," and giving them like a little nod and saying, "I know what you're up to," and being cheeky with them, it's like barriers are broken down, and they get to know you as a person, and then they look out for you. They look out for the sound of your voice. They look out for the fact that you're the person that they'll give them a drink or something like that. Do you know what I mean? And I know, but when my son was growing up, his friends used to call me by my name and used to say, "Sarah," yeah. Sorry, I'm talking on, aren't I?
That's all right. It's fun because this is perhaps what an awful lot of communication is about. It is that developing of that relationship which I suppose, we start by saying rapport, but it actually develops further than that, doesn't it? And it gets into that deep relationship where you can actually pre-guess what the other person is about to say. And that can always be difficult because you then find yourself cutting in on what they're trying to say. And I keep on getting my knuckles wrapped for finishing sentences that somebody else started. And I have to hold myself back and just let them do it.
Sometimes it's just practice.
Well, it is practice.
Yeah.
It's experience.
Yeah, it is.
Does anybody else have that problem, or is it just me, Jackie?
When you talked about being aloof, I was thinking that I think it's important to have like a mix of humility and the genuine intention to try and understand the other person. So when I say humility, I mean you can always say, look, I really don't get what you're saying sometimes. So sometimes I'll ask you to explain to me what you mean if I don't understand what you're saying. But then also not trying to act like you are them. So you don't have to speak their language all the time. And to give you an example, sometimes when I run workshops with young people, there's a certain slang that they speak, and I don't understand it. It's when I was a teenager, we had a slang, but it was not the same slang. So, but I say, honestly, I don't understand. If you want to make a point and you want to speak, your slang, I don't mind, but then you will have to explain to me what you have said. And there are those who speak in slang and explain. Others will speak in slang and someone else will explain, but others will not speak in slang. And I think it works well because I think everybody feels that everybody is making an effort to understand the other person.
Oh, that's great. That especially within a sort of class environment or group environment, everybody does have that difference. And of course, we are all different. And we come up against some people who totally misunderstand what we say because they think in a different way. And that can be hugely challenging. You can try and crack a joke and you find that it's fallen totally on stony ground because the person who you thought had a sense of humor is thinking purely in black and white. No nuance. And that to me can be a challenge because I love banter. I love the opportunity of having a joke, but it can misfire if you don't know who you're talking to. And a lot of you may know I'm ex-military, and one of the things that we were always having to do in the military was to tune our transmitters and our receivers in the radio frequencies so that they could actually talk to one another. And it used to be sometimes incredibly difficult because I'm talking a very long time ago. I think it's much easier these days with digital communications, but very long time ago when we were talking about high frequencies and things like that and bouncing radio waves around the world, to actually try and to actually try and tune in the receiver to the transmitter was actually quite a challenge. But it's the same with people, isn't it? Is it the transmitter's job to tune the receiver, or is it the receiver's job to tune to the transmitter? Or is it both? And it's the same when we're, as I say, it's the same when we're actually talking to people. How much flexibility have you got to move from where you are towards the receiver? How much do you hope the receiver is going to move towards you so that you find that common ground? And how quickly can you do it? And that is, yeah. Sarah.
I was going to say a little bit of empathy is needed on both parts so that people can see things from each other's point of view. Do you know what I mean? When you receive them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one of the great difficulties of that transmission reception solution is the pathway. And the pathway actually starts in the human world, and probably in the rest of the animal world, of how am I feeling? As is the message that I want to send over going to be affected by the way I'm feeling? If you want to put out the message, hi, everybody's fine and things like that, and yet inside you're feeling absolute rubbish, how much of that is going to get across? What's going to get picked up at the other end? And at the other end, how is the receiver feeling? Have they just come out of a thumping great argument with somebody and they're really not interested? And they receive a text which winds them absolutely skywards. Whose fault's that? Are you ready to see what the situation is? How are you going to repair it? How much time can we now give ourselves to think, I've just seen that written message. How many different ways could it, how many different ways, how many different ways can it, how many different meanings can it have, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Or communication. How many different meanings? I was thinking of one today, which was just a case of coffee time. Now, if that was just written down, coffee time, what does that mean to you?
It's how you perceive the coffee time.
You see, yes, okay. But what is it? What does coffee time mean to you? If I just said the coffee time now,
that you want to go for a coffee.
You want to go for a coffee? Okay, that's one thing it can mean. What else could it mean?
Somebody needs to reflect or just have a little bit of time to themselves.
Okay, so break away from what you're doing and do something different, perhaps. Yeah.
Maybe to smoke a cigarette.
Okay. Is it a euphemism? Yeah, good point. Is it a case of, could it be somebody in Brazil who grows the stuff?
Maybe
coffee time could be harvest.
Or it could be time to slow down, reset, something like that, I thought.
Time to slow down, reset. And what about the emotions you could put into it? Coffee time. Yeah. I'm not interested in coffee. Coffee time. Coffee time.
I'm so stressed. I need a coffee.
I'm so stressed. It's coffee time. I've been waiting for this all morning. It's coffee time. I'm going to see my friend. It's coffee time. Oh, I better avoid that coffee because it's awful. Yeah, there's so many different meanings that you can put to it, and that's from the written word is very difficult. Now, of course, these days, the time that we have to understand the communication is getting smaller and smaller. We see things, we've got to react to them. Have we? We think we have. A message comes in on WhatsApp. You read it, you respond. Have you responded correctly? How many emojis were in there? Were they sarcastic? Who knows? But there was a wonderful time when we would write letters to one another, and the letter would arrive in the post, and the post wouldn't go off until the following day, and you had 24 hours to think about your reply. At least. These days, you're lucky if you've got 24 seconds. So how can we get round that problem?
Well, again, it's how you communicate. I would like you to take some time to think about what we're talking about.
Sure.
Communication.
Some people need that all the time, but others don't.
Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, so I deal with communication in a a wide range of environments. And I try to simplify it. Effectively, it's the context, the situation or the background of the communication. And I kind of always refer to the 5 W's, the where, the when, and how, and who, and what. The second part of the communication is the intent. What is the reason for the message? What do I want them to achieve? And ultimately, what is the key message? What's the main point you want the audience to remember, or that person? And that's the bit that they walk away from the conversation, they're hearing 80% of what you said, but you need them to remember the key point. And that's generally between 10 and 20%. So for me, it's always been the context, the intent, and the key message. You need to really filter out of all of the stuff that we speak and how we transmit what we're trying to say. And that could be, emotion is quite distracting for somebody. Someone that's quite animated, they're looking at your fingers or your hands, not listening to what's being said. So it's the art of getting as much over as possible for them to remember with the least amount of effort.
Oh, I like that. Get as much over as possible with the least amount of effort. That takes some planning.
It's a skill that's developed over time. So like you, I've spent 40 years in the military. I've recently left. So I've specialized in how do I communicate with other nations, other persons, different backgrounds. We have different languages. You use the analogy of the coffee. Coffee for a British person is we're going to take a break. It's synonymous of it takes 5 minutes to drink a cup of coffee. That 5 minutes is we're going to take a pause, have a coffee, then revisit, be it a problem. So it goes back to the rapport, which is clearly part of the context, and developing that with your audience to finely tune who you are and what you want to develop with the one that's receiving your transmission, back to your original point.
Oh.
And there's another aspect of what Steve is saying here, and that is, turn it around the other way. When you want somebody to react fast, you've got to be able to order them to do just that. And that can take practice to a certain extent, can't it, Steve? You're talking about you want somebody to do something because that's what they're trained to do. You've got to give them the right words, and those right words will automatically send them off in the right direction because there is no time.
I also find the effective use of tonality is super important. If we look at children, if we speak to a children in a very, as we're talking now, children don't generally listen. But if you apply tone to certain parts of what you're trying to convey, they will listen because you've changed the level of how you've transmitted the way you speak. So it's about breaking the mundane approach of how we talk to someone, because if you don't pitch and roll your communication, people tend to zone out and don't necessarily listen. Whereas with a child, they're always zoned out effectively. So you've got to have the tone at the right time. And that goes back to what is the key message you want that child to remember? And it is, in a tone that tidy your bedroom, and that's where you develop it from there. So part of what I've been developing with other clients is what's the message you want to get across and what's really important. And what's really important is we effectively apply a tone to it, because that's the bit that I want them to remember when they walk away from the conversation.
It's an interesting take in that example you've given about the children. Yes, I agree. You can apply a certain tone so that they pay attention to that particular part of the message. But if you keep using that tone, then they cease to hear. So it's not just about the tone itself, but the way you adjust your tone in the moment so that they notice the difference.
So I had a client, she was 55 years old, and effectively she had struggled at work because her team didn't listen to her at all. And I got to explain the situation. and she was always at a very high tone. She was always pretty much shouting. And I turned around and said to herself, well, the next meeting, what I would like you to do when you're upset, because clearly you're in a very stressful environment, is do the opposite. Don't shout. Just say in a quiet voice, can we now stop what we're doing and focus? And she went, I can't do that. I said, well, just try it. She did it, and everyone stopped what they were doing and looked at her because she was no longer in the high stress mode. She had gone from what they expected her, and that was the anticipated expectancy, whereas now she was the opposite. And she was learning to how to moderate the way she conveyed with her team by pitch and roll and the tonality. But she'd reversed it to a point that she was no longer at high stress. And when she wanted something to be enacted, she would then raise her voice to a position that was different to what it was previously. So it's more self-awareness. And sorry, one of the ladies mentioned empathy. So I also think that clarity and brevity is super important. And yet again, it's a skill you have to filter and refine as you engage with people, because empathy is fantastic, but it's the clarity and the brevity that also complements it to get the right message across.
No, I actually agree with you, because I have worked with people for 40 odd years now, and of all different stages of life, and not be you can't be angry with them. It's just understanding that they might be going through complexities. Their upbringings might be totally different to your upbringing and things like that. And tonality, if somebody was in danger, I'd raise my voice and say stop. But if they were just talking, I'd probably talk in a calm manner. But if I was putting a view across to somebody in like a question time sort of thing, I find my voice going a little bit higher, but a bit more firmer, so I was being passionate towards what I was saying. Am I making sense? Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah. So I agree with everybody. Yeah.
So have we got any other different views on this one? Teresa?
I don't have a different view on it, and I absolutely agree with the voice tonality part. Being the mother of a child, she's 8 years old and she's currently nonverbal. A lot of our communication is around voice tonality and also body language, the ability to be able to mirror and match her body language as well, to help her to feel safe in the environment is so important. And it's something that I also try to infuse into my adult interactions as well, because whilst I might not speak the language of an adolescent, I could maybe match their body language, the way that they're sitting, just to kind of make them feel safe in that environment at the same time. So I do have a huge focus on body language, gestures, also for my daughter to be able to, come to her level when we're talking. So sometimes, like, for example, leaders, they can stand up very authoritative in a meeting, but in actual fact, why not come to the level of the people that you're speaking to as well, so that you can connect even more deeply? So I do feel that there is a more emphasis. Sorry, she's just asking me to get her talker a moment. I think there's a huge emphasis around body language as well, and how we can use that more effectively in our communication. According to what you read, 55% of our communication is down to our body language and our gestures, 38% voice tonality, 7% the words that we use, depending on what you use. So for me, the body language part is huge.
I think the body language is huge. I'm just going to put in a flag here that the Mebrahim figures that you've just used, Teresa, were a very small study, and was purely about if the communication was in conflict. So that if I said I feel great and my body said, oh no, you're not, it would be around about those 55%. But I think there's no doubt that the written word is a very small part of the communication. The spoken word is a larger part, and the body language and tonality that then go with it are huge. I think absolutely.
We don't always have the luxury of that when we're communicating on WhatsApp, though, for the body language part as well. So,
Indeed.
which is
Indeed.
why
And
the
perhaps that's where
transmission.
perhaps that's where a lot of the problems of social media stem from, is the reliance on the written word. You know, how many people have lost how many children do we know who've lost BFFs because they've totally misunderstood what has been written?
Yeah, my father-in-law at one time thought that LOL, laugh loud, was
Yeah.
lots of love. He thought it was lots of love, and he started selling LOL to lots of people in his text messages, but it wasn't obviously lots of love. It's lots of laughter. So you had the wrong context.
Right.
It's something.
Sorry, Reece.
Sorry, sorry, I can't see your name. Is it Teresa? Is it on the screen right now?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's interesting you say that because part of my day job now is I'm a professional mediator. And effectively, it's the communication between both parties, and it could be commercial, could be, individuals. But it's all about the interpretation of what is being messaged. And when I have clients in the same room, it is exactly what was described before, is the attitude of what we understand in our little world, so to speak. But our behavior is exhibited in a particular way. So the position of one is vastly different to another. If it wasn't, I wouldn't be in that room doing the mediation piece. But what's really interesting is the definition of what has been said, because what it does, it basically threatens their position, their needs, and their interests. So back to your LOL, I've sat in a room where they've been arguing that, and I kind of, the penny's dropped, and I'm giving it, can I just ask a question between both parties? And there was an argument about the same thing, but they were looking at it from two different ends. And when they realized that it was the same, that they both had the kind of misinterpretation of it, they centered and said, oh, okay, well, I'm okay then, if that's what it means. And that was it, finished. But this dispute had been going on for about 2 or 3 weeks. And it was a simple misinterpretation of what had been messaged. And it was something along the lines of LOL, abbreviation that was used, which was effectively, it'd been personalized by both parties and had been weaponized in the written words and had led to a confrontation in the workplace. And it was a simple misunderstanding. So LOL.
LOL, lots of love.
Well, possibly, yeah.
Possibly.
Well, I fell into that trap actually when I first met it as well. So there you go. But what can we do about it? How can we help our children to see through these situations so that they are better prepared with all the information that is flying around the world to work out what it actually means?
Well, if
So
I
I
send,
always,
oh, sorry.
no, please do.
I was going to say, if I send a text, I'll put an emoji next door to it. So I'll put either a smiley face or I'll put, a laughing face, or because it breaks the ice and people know that it's sent in a nice way rather than a horrible way. Or I put ... next to the question, so it goes ... So it calms it and soothes it out, so people realise you're just talking.
Okay.
But that's just me. Yes. Yeah,
Right.
sorry, Stephen.
So that is one way. What if Steve's dealing with, where you have two people and it's not about your communication, but it's about their communication. And let's say we've got two 12-year-olds who have fallen out over a text. How can we get them to understand about going forward, not just resolving that issue, but preparing them so that they can think to make sure that they understand what's been said?
You could perhaps ask them from their point of view. Sorry.
Well, indeed.
Yeah, I think that there would have to be more talking to each other. I mean, like, just ask, what did your friend mean? This, you think she meant this, but what if she meant something else? And the only way you can find out what she actually meant is by asking, which means you have to talk. I mean, it may not be talking, but you really need to ask to let the other person know that you have an interpretation that may not be what they intended.
So am I getting from that it's effectively what we're saying is that people should pause to reflect?
That's one. Because when you're reading, you are putting your emotion into the words, you're putting your tone into the words, but that may not be the tone and the emotion that the other person was putting into the words, or the tone and emotion that the other person meant to send. I mean, even if you start off a message with a smiley face, I mean, for me, it doesn't really mean anything, you know, because I just don't have a relationship with emojis. So there needs to be more than just my own interpretation. There needs to be an awareness that there was an intention, and I may not be clear on what that intention was.
So are we talking about time? Time to stop and think, rather than just go off and react.
That's one way to look at it.
How important do you think that is? And are we teaching our children that? I say, are we teaching our children? Are they being taught? Whose responsibility is it?
I was going to say,
Sorry.
sorry.
Hang on a minute, Sarah. Sonia, you were just about to say something.
Yeah.
Well, depending if the situation's at home or at school or at work, if it's teenagers at work, I think there's different scenarios how it's dealt with. But if I mentioned earlier about sometimes reflection, but sometimes you've heard that saying, you have to nip it in the bud, because whatever happens, you have to listen to both sides. So both children, say the two 12-year-olds, you have to listen and see what either one's saying, and then put a perspective on it. You know, you have to, because either one is going to think they're right. So it's just how to calm the situation down, and then, you know, they have to realize. Well, I know what I'm trying to say, but I do think you have to listen to both sides.
Absolutely. So we're talking dispute resolution.
Yes, but to get the resolution, you have to let them both speak, one at a time.
I think it's really important to model and to teach active listening to everybody, but you know, particularly in this situation, because kids don't know how to you know, to give feedback, you know, or to get clarification on what they've heard. Because if they're not truly understanding what the other person is saying, I don't see them getting to a point of resolution.
So active listening skills. Can you clarify what they need to be active listeners?
Sure. So if I'm teaching someone to be an active listener, I'll say, I want you to hear what the person is saying, and then in your own words, I want you to say back to them what they've just said, and then they have an opportunity to clarify whether you're right or wrong, or yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just going to sort of broaden this a bit. Okay, we've got teenagers now, 15, 16-year-olds, who are following the shoutings of various prime ministers and presidents from around the world, and they're picking up half a story because they are picking up the story they're picking up is what is being reported in the papers, in the headlines of the papers. Let's put it that way. And how their immediate reaction, because of their lack of experience, is to believe what is written, believe what is said. What can we do to help them to check? Diana. Diana, you're on mute at the moment.
Yeah, I'm on mute. Sorry, very slow with the technology.
That's all right. Most of us are.
Apologies for being late. You can see I'm still struggling with the technology. Okay, you're talking about prime ministers around the world. I mean, I was recently comparing it with my experience of news. I find that I have a view, and then when I hear somebody's voice in my view, I will tend to be the person I'll listen to. However, I fully admit that the adolescents may not have a view yet. It may be a topic that's new, and it's possible that they'll take the first view that they have and probably shared amongst their friends. And once they listen or see that if it's on their mobile phone, the algorithm will keep sending them stuff that says that, reinforcing it. So I guess the thing that I'm thinking, I guess part of it I'm questioning, where else can you get your source of information? Who else you listen to? So it is really about self-questioning. What other views are there? Who else can I get? It's a bit like debate, isn't it? Can I get both sides? Can I listen to the other side and then draw my conclusion? So I guess the skill is questioning and getting a balanced view and then making your decision.
Yeah.
How can we teach this at school?
I think it's the very basics. I think children need to understand, back to the iceberg theory and understand the difference between perception and perspective. We all understand the world differently and we all form our own opinions. And what we need to be able to do is, as Kathy had suggested, is the active listening, but also encouraging those that to not to react, but to listen, and then formulate their own opinions from that, and then be sent away to look at a different view and see what the information out there, how it contradicts what's being said. And it's about developing those skills. And you mentioned before about we live in a very fast-paced world, and to feel valued, to feel part of something, we're just going to have an opinion based on what little we know. And then that's when you get all the Facebook warriors, that start to generate these opinions that are effectively not necessarily true at all. So it's an education process. And where does it start? Well, it starts at home, parents, at schools. Schools can educate them in ways of what it means, because then it reaffirms what parents are telling them. But I also think there's opportunities for coaches out there to, if there was a curriculum for within schools, is to have coaches and go through, what communication means, and back to, about the transmitter and the receiver, and what does it all mean? Why is it so important for me to understand that? Because as we go through life, if we don't communicate, it causes conflict, and that's when you parachute someone like me in to help with conflict. And that business model in itself, if we can't communicate, alternatively, it all goes back down to the conflict. So more conflicts just demonstrates that we have less communication skills.
Perhaps you would have something in the curriculum called communication.
Yeah, I think the very basics.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah.
Steve, sorry.
You can have life skills.
Life
We
skills.
call it life skills or preparation for adulthood. Yeah.
So, I think everything we've been talking about today is about communicate, well, it is about communication. That's what we set out to do. But I think, the important thing that we seem to be getting to is that we have got to teach our children, because their communication world is different to ours. And certainly, it was a long time ago that I was at school. And even throughout a lot of my career, communication was not nearly so fast as it is today. And I think if we can, what I'm getting from all of this is if we can actually get our children to stop, think, react, they'd be in a better place going forward, bearing in mind that they're the ones who are going to have to who are going to have to rule the world very shortly. Diana.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long time since I went to school as well. But one thing I do remember is teachers will technically ask you closed question. They want the right answer, right? So there's no reason why they can't kind of change that. And even if the person gives them the wrong answer, it's not like, so why do you believe that? Or why do you think it's that? So it's just like, rather than, I mean, I don't know if anybody else hated it, because you think, unless you knew the right answer, you didn't put your hand up. So you weren't encouraged to think, you were just encouraged to spout the right answer.
I think you're right. And very noticeable at the time. I'm not going to get on my soapbox. You'd be delighted to hear. But I think it does beholden on us all, isn't it, to encourage our children to stop and think. And trying to get a teenager to do that is quite a challenge. I know I have to. But it's going forward. It's almost as, you know, there's a huge number of adults in exactly the same situation. That the pressures on them are such that they don't have time to think. Do we actually pause to reflect how our communications are? Our own personal communications?
I was going to say, Ian, just going back to the, the politics side of things and papers, I think the closest to the truth you can get is actually the military men and women, because they know what's happening around the world. They know the conflict. They know everything that's being asked of them, and they know everybody's story of why countries are conflicting against each other. And
I would like to think so, Sarah, but
yeah,
you know, I think it's a case of getting knowledge from all different directions.
angles. Yeah.
Kathy,
Sorry.
Kathy, we'll give you the last word.
Oh, I was just going to say that a dear friend of mine is a grade 6 teacher in a Montessori school in New Mexico, and he teaches his kids the stop method. So stop, take a breath, observe what's around you, and then proceed. And before they're making any kind of decision or communication, he has them practice the stop method.
Well, I'm going to take that one away. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, we type that up. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, we're running out of time, or we've run out of time. And so thank you so much indeed. That was a lovely opportunity to hear some excellent views from around the world, which is magic. And that's really what these events are all about. I am hoping that, where are we, March? I am hoping that April's is going to be about addiction.
Yes.
So that might be interesting. We've got, I know we've got 1 or 2 people who are involved in addiction and addiction recovery. Not any particular addiction, but addiction nevertheless. And I look forward to another great debate. Hopefully this will be a presentation with questions, and then perhaps we'll then follow up in a couple of sessions' time with a debate about it. Because there's a huge amount out there, and the more we actually learn to understand, the better off we can help our children. So thank you very much indeed, everybody. I will get this recording sorted out and onto the Ethernet as soon as I can, and but hopefully by the end of the week. So for all of those who participated, for all of those who were just present today, thank you very much indeed. And I wish you a great day in your states, Kathy, and a great evening almost, I think, for everybody else.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you very
Take care.
much for sharing.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.